In this tutorial, I'll show you how to take an object and easily teleport it around to different locations. You can even change the scale and rotation, as well as reset it back to its original position. The teleporting point can even be a moving object. Warning, complicated tutorial ahead.
In Unity, the first thing I'm going to do is create the object to teleport around. I'm going to create the structure in a strange way, but I'll explain it as we go along. First, create a game object that we will use as the parent. I'm going to call it object parent, as I want it to be very obvious it is the parent and not actually the object itself. Next, create another game object, and this is actually going to be the object that will teleport around. Just naming it object. I'll set this object up as the standard pickup, so first let's add a VRC pickup script. Next, I'll add a box collider. I'll just make this a trigger and 0.3, 0.3, 0.3. Move this up a little bit. Now create some visuals, so add a cube. Leave the collider, let's make it smaller. And then just to indicate the direction of this object, I will also add a sphere. And make it even more obvious, I'll change the color to say green there. So yeah, very obvious on the direction. Going back to this object here, I'll also add a VRC object sync. That way other people will see it as well. This can cause some issues for later parts of this, but I'll address those as well. So now starts the weird part. Let's add an animator, or animation, to this. So make sure this is the legacy animation and not the new animator, which is the animation controller. So now let's create our clip. We can go over to this animation button and create the new clip. It's going to be weird, but I'm going to put it in a strange naming folder, which I'll be more obvious later, calling it press. Go inside there and name the animation lock transform. So I'm now going to go up here and then make sure that the position is zeroed out, the rotation is also zeroed out, and the scale is set to 1s. So looking at this, position's all 0, rotation's all 0, and scale is all 1. I forgot to mention this earlier, but it's important that you keep the scale set at 1 for all of these values. The position and rotation can be anything at start, but just to make things easier for later on, just leave the scale at 1 for your object here. One last thing, which I'm not sure why Unity doesn't set, I noticed that this is none, so go into press and drag the locked transform into here as well. Clearly it added there, but just not here. So our object is all set for teleportation, but we need now to add points to teleport to. So inside the parent object, I'm just going to create a new object, and I'm going to call this teleportation points. You don't really need the higher or structure like this. I'm just doing it for organization. And so I'm going to create another one, and I'm going to call this TP1 for, like, say, teleport point 1. Doesn't matter. Let's move it over here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add an animator. So not like an animation from the last one, but animator. Next, and I'm going to add a button. So this is technically a UI component, but none of the visuals will matter. All that matters is this on-click function. Basically, it's the Unity event system, which you can then use to call methods on other objects. So we'll fill this out in a minute, but first let's go and create a new animator. Inside your pressed folder, I'm going to create animation controller. I'm going to call it press controller, which it now makes sense that it's called press. I'm going to drag the controller onto the teleport point. Inside here, I'm going to create a new animation, call it press. And instead of doing, say, like adding properties, I'm going to do something different. You can right-click this bar here and add an animation event. Basically, animation events will allow you to call any method on the object that contains the animator. It's really nice because you can even call custom triggers with this. So for our example here, I'm going to use the press command. And that is all we have for the animation. And so we can come back here and fill out this on-click method. For this, we'll need 4 different on-click method calls. The first, let's drag the object in here. I'm going to then say transform, set parent. I'm going to set the parent to this teleportation point. Next, I'm going to drag the object again, set in here, go to animation, and then click sample. basically sample will take whatever the animation clip that is on the object and just set it to the first keyframe that is on there, which in our example, it's going to be setting it to the 000, and since now it has a new parent, 000 will be the location of teleport point 1. Next, drag the object back in, set the transform, go to parent, and I'm going to put it back to object parent. Last, drag the teleport point into this last one here, and set the function to game object, set active, and leave it as unchecked. This will basically say that as soon as it's active, it'll do these and then turn itself back off so that you can use it again. The nice thing about all of this is that I'm not using any VRC triggers, so you can in fact test it in Unity. So since it is enabled, it will immediately call this function, and I'll show you here. And see, it teleported over. So that's pretty much it for basic teleportation. But just moving the object is not enough. Let's do some more. So I'm going to duplicate this, call this TP2, and then call it scale. It'll make sense in a second. Let's move this over, but then also, let's just say make it huge. And as an example, I'm also going to rotate the Z-axis, so it's in a different orientation. And also, I just realized both of these are turned on, so let's turn them off. And to show you what happened here, press the play button, go to this game object, and once everything's ready, I can turn it on, and the object is huge now. Just for consistency, I'll do one more here, and just instead of it making it larger, let's make it smaller. So it's set to 4. Let's just do, like, say, 0.5. And we don't need to have the scaling, and move it over 2. And just to show the example, now it's tiny. And so if you're wondering, you can just switch between these two. They don't really affect each other right now. Out of these basic teleports, there's one more that is very useful. Let's say the object has been moved around and you want to reset it back to the position. You could use the VRC trigger option that is teleport object, but that requires the object to have the object sync on there as well, and it sometimes messes up the transform. Using this method, you can move the object anywhere you want, and we can have it so that the reset point automatically saves exactly where it is at runtime. So you don't have to worry about rotation or readjusting positions and things. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this teleport 1, and I'm going to paste it inside the game object here. Call it reset. I'm going to reset its position so it's back to itself, and leave all of these as they're set properly. But there's an issue of this object is a child of the object itself, but we can't set the parent to be itself, so we need to move it outside of this. So I'm going to then copy it again, put it inside here, and then call this reset setup. Noticing the position there, reset it again. But then you don't need any of these, so we can just remove all but one. And all we're going to do is take the reset point, and we're going to set transform, set parent, and we're going to set it to the teleportation points. One last thing is to leave it checked or enabled at start. That way it'll happen immediately and not, until you turn it on, which then will be too late. So now let's show it in action. I can turn on the play. We can teleport it to teleport 1. It moves over there. We can then make it larger. We can then change its size. And then, okay, we're done. Let's put it back. So that's all for the basic teleports. In-game, all you need to do is turn on one of the teleport game objects to move your object over. Let's set up some buttons here so that we can do it in VRChat. So I'm going to create a new object here, reset the position. Let's move the buttons over here. Call this buttons. Just close these here. Inside, create a new object, not a sphere, let's create a cube. Again, make it 0.2, just because sizing is okay. Let's add a VRC trigger, custom on interact, if I can find it again. Add basic events. Let's set game object active, true, plus sign, and this will be teleport 0.1. Move it up some so that we know what it is. Let's name it TP1. and say TP1. Duplicate it, set 2, TP2, game object scale, and move it over, say like 0.33, or actually negative 0.33. Duplicate it again, 3, 6, 6, TP3, and set game object to smaller. Last one, TP4, which is also a reset. Find the reset object in here, place that, and set this to -1 there. There, now we have our buttons. So teleport 1, teleport 2, teleport 3, reset. So now in VRChat, we have our game object, we got our buttons. We can take the game object and if I can mouse it, throw it around. Okay, so let's move it around. TP1 works over there. TP2, now it's a larger one and you can still pick it up and everything. Throwing it back. TP3, puts a little tiny one over here. And then finally, TP4 reset, a little bit bigger. That's all you need for basic static teleports. But let's take it to the next step and teleport to a moving object. We'll need to handle things differently depending on if the teleported object has the object sync component or not. I'll first show the case when the object does not have the object sync. This will be a somewhat practical example as I just implemented this in one of my maps. Let's say I want to have a camera in my map and I want multiple camera views for it, including a pickup version. I also only have one location to display the camera's feed. We could have a camera and a render texture for each of these positions, or we could just have one and teleport the camera around. I'm not going to show the setup process for the camera, but if you haven't already, watch tutorial 2 on how to do this. Skipping ahead here, I have my camera scene set up. I have the camera ready as the object to be teleported. It has the animation component, and make sure it is disabled. Next, I have the camera shape here. It's set up as a standard pickup object. It has the object sync component with it, which will not be an issue since this is not the object being teleported around. Inside, I have the camera point here, which is just going to indicate the location to teleport the camera to. Moving on, I have the camera points here, which is the same as the teleport points from the last example. The first two are exactly the same, that it's just taking the camera, teleporting it, and then putting it back. The last one is the only one that's different. First difference here is that instead of the camera reparenting itself to the teleport point, I have it reparent to the camera point underneath the camera shape here. The second difference here is that after setting the parent and sampling the animation, I do not reparent it back to its original parent. This keeps the camera relative to the camera shape here, which is the pickup object, allowing it to move with it. Lastly, we have the buttons here, which pretty much do the exact same thing as the other ones. Just a simple on-trigger, interact, set game object active. So currently the way to set up, the camera is actually down here and at none of the teleport points. So if I want to set which one is the first or the default, I just have this enabled at start. So now the camera will automatically go to this point when the game starts. So in VRChat, you can see that the camera has already set the default value, which is over there. I can then click the second one to change the view, which is above me. I can click the third button here to then choose the pickup object, as you can see myself talking. You can then move the camera around, so it's over there now, but then I can click the button and go back to any of these views at any time. And it's only using one camera. The last piece is to get an object with the object sync component to teleport and follow another moving object. Things will need to be set up somewhat differently to get them to work in VRChat. In order to do this, we will need some scripts. Thankfully, VRChat whitelists all of the standard assets and we can freely use them within our worlds. I've already done so, but you will need to import the standard asset packages for cameras and utilities here. I'm apologizing now because things are going to get really complicated. Well, let's get started. I'm going to first just move these out of the way some. Take this one, duplicate it, and rename it. Let's move it over here, and just to differentiate it, I will also change the material on the top portion. So just for organization, I'm just going to create another object here and call it moving as the example. Reset the transform, put this in there, just to have something different. Next, let's go inside here, and inside the object, I'm going to create a new game object, and I'm going to call it follow. I will then add the block transform, uncheck it, and then inside that, I will create another game object, and I will call it lookAt. For this lookAt object, I'm just going to move it forward in the Z direction. Doesn't matter how much, just as long as it is in Z direction. So back on the teleport object here, I'm going to go down and add two scripts. First is the follow target script, and second is the lookAt target script. Next, uncheck both of these to make sure they are turned off. So drag the follow component here into the target of this follow target, and then make sure the offset is set to 0, 0, 0. So this script will make it so that the current object here is always at least this offset away from the position of the follow object. The offset is here is in global coordinates, and it does not rotate the object, and that is why we have this lookAt target script. Next, drag the lookAt object into the target for the lookAt target script, uncheck the auto target player, leave the update type, and then for this example, I'm just going to set both of these to 360. Basically, these are the ranges around, say, the x-axis and the y-axis for how much our object is allowed to turn to look at this object, so our lookAt object. And they're based off the original orientation of the object, so if you set it to something lower, it will only rotate some amount and never be able to go further. Last, set the follow speed here to 0. Follow speed is a little hard to explain, and I feel it has a really bad name. Basically, the lower the number, the faster it moves. It's trying to calculate the new rotation than the old rotation. The higher the number, the closer it'll be to the previous one, but if you set it to 0, it'll update to the new rotation only. As of right now, we don't have a location to teleport to, so I'll create something as an example. I'll create a new game object. Let's call this moving objects. Create another game object inside that. Let's call this MO1 for moving object 1. I'll move it, let's put it there, and then up a little bit. Inside here, create another game object. I'm going to call this TP1. And then inside that, I'm going to create a cube. Let's make it smaller. And remove the box collider. Take this, since it's the parent, move it over one. Go over to here. Just add a constant force here. Uncheck gravity, freeze the rotation, or freeze the position here. Remove the angular drag. Set this to 0.5. Not explaining anything I'm doing here. Adding a VRC trigger. Let's go in here, find timer, add a timer, set this to 2 seconds. Again, not explaining anything here. Let's find the set component active, add a new one, drag this in, set it to false, constant force. Okay, good. So basically what I just did here was I set up an object, so it's centered at this point, but it's moving over here, that when you start it, it'll just start rotating around the axis here. But since Unity is just going to continually add more and more force, I had to add a VR trigger just to turn it off because it's just going to keep going faster and faster. Just so we have multiple examples here, I'm going to duplicate this object, change the name, change this from the y-axis to the x-axis, and just move it over some. Okay, we have our moving objects, and we have the teleport object mostly set up. Now we need to set up the events to actually teleport the object around. So let's go inside the teleport points here, delete the TP2 and 3, and then inside TP1, yeah, let's just start this over on scratch. Remove all of these. And for what we're going to do, add 7 of them back in. The first 2 events will be set up similar to how they were last time, but instead of dragging the object in, I'm going to now drag the follow object in for the first 2. So set the transform of the first one to this TP1, and then set the animation sample. The next 4 events here will all use the object, so let's just go ahead and drag each one of those in. For the first one, I'll go in, find the follow target, set enabled, check it. Second one, set the look at target enabled, check it. Next, go to rigid body. Let's find use gravity and uncheck that. And then the last one here, again go to the rigid body, find is kinematic, and then check that. This last event here is just going to be as all the other ones were, drag its own object in, set game object, set active, and then put it as unchecked. So what this is doing is it's moving our follow object to be a child of the object we want to follow. It then tells our teleport object to use the script to follow our follow object. We also made it so that this object no longer is affected by gravity and it won't be moving through physics, but just through script. So duplicate this object twice. Let's rename the first one here to TP2, and then this last one to follow reset. Inside TP2, find our TP2 point, which I need to rename because I forgot to do that. And then inside the follow reset, we're pretty much just going to undo everything that we just did. So set the parent back to our object, leave the sample, uncheck follow target, uncheck look at, check use gravity, and unchecked gravity, our kinematic. Now go back to our object up here and add another component, VRC trigger. Add an on drop trigger. Inside here, go to basic events, set game object active, add game object, let this follow reset here, and true. This will make it so that you can still pick up the object while it's moving around and it won't be forced to follow these pieces. Doesn't really matter, but I'm noticing that the object is kind of far off, so I'm just going to go through all of these and reset their transforms. And now our preparations are done, so let's make the buttons to do the work for us. I'll take the buttons that we had from the previous ones, I'm just going to duplicate this and then move them over. Push this inside here and rename it. So take the first button, change this to now be this TP1. Take the second one, make it to this second TP. Take the third one, and I'm going to actually make it the follow reset, and just type that here. And last, our reset one, make it go to the reset within our object. But one additional thing, since this is still going to be using the follow script, I also need to add the follow reset inside our reset. And with that, everything should be ready. It's time to test and see if this mess worked. Scratch that, I made a mistake. Go back to the object up here, scroll down, find the VR trigger, change this from on drop to on pickup. No idea why I said on drop, but it makes more sense when you pick it up, you gotta turn off the follow components. Okay, so in VRChat here, we've got our object, we can pick it up, we can throw it, good. We got our moving objects over there, let's TP1. Oh, so now the object is over here. I can still grab it, I can still throw it. Next, TP2. It's going over that. But thanks to how the lookout target works, it flips kind of strangely. Yeah. Next, we can reset the follow, which should just make it drop. But there's a bug with how Unity physics and networking is, and it'll just drop super slowly. Yeah. But thankfully, as soon as you pick it up, it goes back to normal. So, as I showed before, reset button works. So, TP2, TP1, reset. And this shouldn't do anything. And that's everything for this complicated tutorial. If you come up with a creative idea on how to use the topics from this, describe it in the comments. If you have any questions, you can message me in Discord. I may not be able to answer everything, but if you join the official VRChat Discord, you can ask in the Worlds channel, as there are many other people willing to help out. Thanks for watching.
Oh, sweet, a sword. Time to slice this red thing.